The call to the single life started over 15 years ago. I was moaning because I was single and did not have a partner. I was asked had I prayed, and I thought, well, this will be a handy thing to do. So I did, and I got a picture. I was in a garden, there were lots of green around, and I was walking on the grass on the border where it met taller grass. I saw a red flower and I went over to look. I bent down, intrigued, looking at the flower from all angles. Suddenly, there was a person standing behind me, and he put his arm just beneath my elbow and, assisting me, he lifted me up to a standing position. I immediately turned round and gave him the red flower that was in my hand from the ground. And then I knew that this man was going to be my husband. From that time, I saw pictures or in real life see representations of the flower in the garden. As the years went past, it became apparent that the picture was more than just a get a partner and live happily ever after. During the time of waiting, and like Mary pondering, I had another picture. This time I was in front of a huge church, very cathedral-like. I was dressed in a wedding dress with my veil down. I walked in through the heavy doors and it was in semi-darkness. I was walking to the altar resolutely by myself. The altar had this amazing and huge light. It was very, very bright, and I was transfixed by it. I continued to walk to the light, and that is all I saw. A few months later, I saw a card in a shop that had the church that was in my picture, with a woman in a wedding dress by herself. I gulped, and it felt like the mystery was deepening. Then I started coming across texts that speak of making vows and fulfilling them, being the bride of Christ, being in union with God, and giving up all for the kingdom. During this time, the Spirit spoke to me about the fact that in the picture, the person I gave the flower to is actually Jesus, and the flower represents all that I am. I was blown away by this, to be honest. A few friends knew, and the sister I was connected with at the Abbey knew. The suggestion was to speak to my then bishop. At the same time, I came across an organization called the Single Consecrated Life Network. What had been happening over the years seemed to point to this, and so I joined. I spoke to my bishop in the Leeds diocese around 2011, and it was agreed that I should take temporary vows. After the vow has expired, you are invited to renew your temporary vow, make a final vow, or decide that this is not for you and leave altogether. The advantage of that is that you get time to think about what you're doing. The years whizzed by, hospital stays, changing jobs, sick parents, a pressurized job, and bereavement happened. Life happened, and needless to say, praying and being mindful of the single consecrated life went on the back burner until I came to Kent. I started having dreams, reading Bible texts about vows, and the fact that I made temporary vows kept on coming to mind too. The pivotal moment was when a friend sent me a card for the anniversary of my vow. It seemed to come out of nowhere. And then I thought, I have to do something about this, as clearly the call had not gone away. I got back in touch with the network, spoke to my spiritual director and with my contact at the Abbey. They all affirmed that I had a call and I should speak to the bishop, Bishop James, that is. He was very affirming and agreed to set a date for me to make my final vows in March, which would have been on the Feast of the Annunciation. COVID dealt with that plan and it was rescheduled for Thursday of this week. Today is the third day since I made the vow. Now, what follows is a short reflection on what the passages that we've heard read means to me in the context of the single consecrated life. Matthew first, but before that, be aware that when I reflect, I ask questions of the text. Although I write in the first person, I want you to imagine yourself in place of me. Insert your name. Allow God to speak to you through the questions. Own the places where I say I and me for yourself. So beginning with the Matthew passage. Like the man who spoke to Jesus, what am I holding back from being fully committed to the kingdom? The commitment to the consecrated life means holding nothing back. Everything is his, including my very self. Am I truly his? Am I willing to walk his way and have the 10 Commandments as my guide? In our day, where we see the cost of living rise, injustice to the poor and marginalized, am I willing to walk the way of the poor? In living for life for Jesus, am I willing to live life for others? This way of life does not make me morally flawless, like the rich man was trying to point out. Have I tried to be flawless to others? Later in the text, there is talk of rewards to the disciples. Question: are you in this for what you can get, or are you in this because God is? Leaving family for the kingdom. What priority do I give God in my life? For some, it may be the case literally, whilst not breaking familial bonds. For most, it's about priority and the importance given to God in life. The last sentence sounds a bit mysterious. It is about those who are considered last in the society of the day, who given up home and families, etc., who in fact will be first, and those who are considered first, like the rich man, will be last. In living for God, who is, there is great blessing. Psalm 45 is very poignant. It is as it is an ode to a wedding, and the single consecrated life is thought of as a wedding. As I wed, as I come into closer union with God, am I prepared to forget my Father's house? The King desires my presence. Do I want this? He is now my Lord. Will I bow to him and give him the rightful place in my life? This text came to me so often in prayer and spoke to me deeply about God's love and desire for me. The Philippians passage speaks to me about the humility of Jesus and the fact that I should try and imitate his way of being. Paul sets out in verses 1 to 4 standards for living, and in verses 5 to 1, he looks at how Jesus lives this out. What are the standards? Selfish ambition, valuing others above yourself, and looking out what the interest of others are. Question: what motivates me? What is at the foundation of my ambitions? Do I value others over myself? Do I have a concern for the interest of others? If I do not, I am trying to be first in the way that I am living. If that is the case, I will only end up being last. Remember the passage in Matthew. We are called to live another way, the way of humility. What was Jesus's way of being? Firstly, Jesus sacrificed his position in heaven to come to earth. Am I willing to be sacrificial in the way that I live? Secondly, he was a servant. Whom am I willing to serve? Do I consider myself above certain tasks? Thirdly, Jesus was submissive to the Father. He was obedient. Am I prepared to submit to God and to others I am in relationship with? Fourthly, Jesus experienced suffering and inconvenience. He was obedient unto death. Question, and this is a tough one. How am I willing to walk? Am I willing to walk in the path of inconvenience and suffering for the gospel? In truth, the Christian life is not always about flowers and fairies and good times. The encouragement in all this is the fact that Jesus was exalted to the highest place. If I have the mind of Christ, if I attempt to imitate his way of being and walk the way of humility, I will be lifted up and blessed too. These texts for me in this new way of life speaks about discipleship. It instructs me as to how life is to be from now on. Whether it be the single consecrated life or any other way of being, We need to pray for the grace to live for God through Christ. Amen.